I love the Jackass movies, and thanks to the most recent entry in the series, Jackass Forever, I think everyone else has rediscovered that love that they once had for the franchise. However, with that being said, Jackass wasn't necessarily something I grew up with. It was something I was always fascinated by, but I was never allowed to watch as a kid, purely because it was Jackass. Believe it or not, it wasn't until 2020, during one of the many lockdowns that we had, that I decided to finally see what all the fuss was about and binge all 3 of the Jackass films. And I've got to say, for a series that's been going on this long, Jackass is probably one of the most consistently entertaining franchises out there. And now, having seen all 4 Jackass films, I think I finally understand what makes this franchise so good in the first place, besides all the toilet humour and very painful stunts. There is a certain sense of camaraderie and friendship that only gets stronger with each film in the series, and it kind of adds to all of the painful stunts and over-the-top things that they do in each of the films. If that aspect wasn't there, I don't think these stunts would work as well as they do. This also probably explains why over the years since Jackass was such the success it was, there have been a ton of imitators that haven't necessarily been able to capture the same feel and chemistry of the main 4 Jackass films, purely because they don't have that sense of community and friendship that the Jackass films has, hence why they work as well as they do. For instance, one minute they might all be laughing at a ridiculous stunt that someone has just done, and another minute they all might be worried for each other's safety if one of those stunts goes wrong. Funnily enough, one of the best examples of this is in Jackass Forever, when Johnny Knoxville gets hit by a buffalo and literally goes head over heels. There is no laughing and there is no jokes. Everyone on the sidelines is literally kind of silent, purely because they don't know if Johnny is alive or not. And it is that extra sense of humanity and genuine friendship and care for one another that really elevates these films. Despite those aspects being prevalent in the first 3 Jackass films, I think it is more evident in Jackass Forever than any of the other films in the series. And I think that's down to a couple of reasons. First of all, the main cast are in like their 50s now, so obviously there is that added sense of caution in terms of what they're doing. They might do a stunt, but it might kill them purely because of their age and they're not as agile as they used to be. Plus there is also the added weight of the fact that Ryan Dunn, one of the original members of the cast, died in 2011, not long after the release of Jackass 3D. And I think that added sense of vulnerability adds a lot of weight to what they do in Jackass Forever, and also in the previous 3 films as well. Because there are certain things that they do throughout these films, especially stuff that Johnny Knoxville does, that genuinely baffles you in terms of how the fuck did that not kill them? And the more you watch these films, the more you start to think, Jesus, I think these guys actually might be invincible. And I think even Johnny Knoxville in a few different interviews has said that a certain point in their life, they did actually kind of feel like that because they were getting away with all of these ridiculous things and were still somehow alive. However, with the death of Ryan Dunn in 2011 and the age that they are when they made Jackass Forever, it kind of brings everything back down to earth a little bit. It doesn't take away from the humour at all. If anything, I think Jackass Forever is the funniest of the main 4 Jackass films. That's just my personal opinion. But having that prior knowledge and knowing the age that they are when they made it definitely does add something to the viewing experience that you didn't really have with the previous 3. With that being said though, I do genuinely like the progression and evolution that each of the 4 films has kind of gone through. They don't necessarily change things up drastically with each film. If you've seen one Jackass film, you know exactly what you're going to get for the remaining 3. However, it's just slight things here and there that make each film in the franchise kind of stand on their own 2 feet, whilst also working incredibly well as part of that series. For example, with the original film, this was the first time that they were able to take what worked on a small scale from the TV show and do it on a much bigger scale. So there is a lot of experimentation, but they're also still trying to find their feet, which I think makes the first film a lot interesting, especially when you look back at it and watch it now. And that's not to say that the first movie is bad by any means. One of my favourite pranks in the entire Jackass series is in the first movie, and it's one of the most simple they've ever done. It is of course the prank that ends the film, which is where Ryan Dunn shoves a toy car up his arse and then goes to the doctors to get it x-rayed. It's so incredibly simple, but the whole execution of that scene is just genuinely hilarious, and as I was watching it I was genuinely in tears crying. And then you have Jackass number 2, which I've again also heard in multiple interviews with different members of the cast was them on their worst behaviour, because they knew that the format worked in terms of translating it from the TV show to the first film. They could pretty much do whatever the fuck they wanted with this second film, which is why you get some of the grossest and most outrageous stunts in the whole series in Jackass number 2. As much as I like Jackass number 2 and can completely understand why it is the fan favourite in the series, it's not my personal favourite. I think that still goes to Jackass Forever. But, like I said, there is still a lot to like about Jackass number 2. I also think the second film is a really good example of them trying to experiment with the variety of stunts. You get some really huge over-the-top ones, but you also get some really small little simple stunts as well that work just as well. And personally, I think that with the Jackass films, the simpler stunts can sometimes end up being the best ones. Take Beehive Limo, for example. It's such an incredibly simple prank that works equally as well as something really over the top like, I don't know, Johnny Knoxville's big red rocket that he tries to fly into the sky. Now, whereas the first film was them trying to kind of test the water in terms of what they could do in a film format, and the second one was a good example of them trying to vary things up and really go as far as they can possibly go with some of these stunts, Jackass 3D is a really good example of them going as over the top as they can. Not necessarily in the same sense of Jackass number 2 in terms of how gross or disgusting some of their stunts can be, but more necessarily in terms of the scale. Because in Jackass 3D you get some of the biggest, most over-the-top stunts they've ever done. The most iconic being the porta potty slingshot, which is still disgusting to watch even to this day. And then there is the newest entry in the series, Jackass Forever, which, like I said a second ago, is my personal favourite in the series, because even though I did really enjoy the first 3 films, Jackass Forever is legitimately the first one in the series that had me laughing my arse off from start to finish. Because even though it gives you exactly what you expect from a Jackass film, there's just something about it that clicks with this film. And again, I think that is down to a combination of all the previous things I've just mentioned, whether it be their age, their vulnerability, the new cast members, which is also something that seems a bit tricky in terms of introducing new people to an already established cast, but the way they do it in Jackass Forever feels genuinely quite natural, and a lot of those new cast members play off of the original cast quite well. And I also like the fact that, considering it's been about 10 years since the last Jackass movie, and that one was Jackass 3D, which, like I just said, was the one where they kind of went as big as they could go, Jackass Forever does feel like they're kind of pulling back a little bit in terms of the scale. You still do get some very big stunts in this film, like the one where Johnny Knoxville gets shot out of a huge cannon, but apart from that and maybe 1 or 2 others, a lot of the stunts in Jackass Forever are very simple, to the point, and just work for that purpose. My personal favourite scene in Jackass Forever, and is the one that had me crying with laughter from start to finish, was the Silence of the Lambs. As they were setting it up in the film, I was kind of thinking to myself, I'm surprised they've never done something like that before in any of the previous Jackass films. And then once the prank actually starts going into motion, I kind of understand why they left it until now, because it is so incredibly simple, but it is incredibly hilarious, especially the moment where Zach just bursts through the door and then immediately smacks his head on a load of pans that are just dangling from the ceiling. Again, simple slapstick stuff, but it just works. Whether you're someone that grew up with the Jackass films or has recently got into them like myself, I would love to have a conversation down in the comments about what you think of the films and what they mean to you. If you like the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Bye.